Hello, biologists. Let's study for the midterm exam. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, but I'm hoping that you will pause and actually answer them yourself. Otherwise, there's no point in this because you want to be practicing the recall. This is trying to get you to see what you already know to help you guide your study. So please do pause it, and I will run through the answers so that you have time to think about it and answer yourself. The first question I have is, for a biologist studying a small fish population in a lab, which Hardy-Weinberg condition is easiest to meet? C, no gene flow. What is gene flow? Immigration and emigration, and your fish are in a fish tank. So you can control who goes in and who goes out. Rainbow tails in fish are caused by a recessive allele. The frequency of rainbow tails in a fish population is 0.64. What is P? 0.64 is Q squared. So you're going to unsquare that, and you're going to end up with 0.8 for Q. And then P plus Q equals 1. So P is 0.2. Same setup, but what is the frequency of heterozygotes in this population? You know P and Q, so you can do the formula 2 times P times Q equals a heterozygote population, and that is going to be 0.32. A population of sheep is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. The allele for white wool is dominant, and the allele frequency is 0.19. The allele for black wool is recessive, and the allele frequency is 0.81. What is the percentage of heterozygous individuals in this population? 31. The reason is you've been given P and Q, so now you just do 2PQ equals 31. In 2003, two scientists measured the snout to vent, which is the nose to butt, length of Galapagos marine iguanas, and then observed the percent survival of the different sized animals. Let's take a moment to look at their graph. We have the log snout to vent length in millimeters. So this is their body size. We're excluding the tail because the tail is variable. And then you have the survivorship. So the higher on the graph, the more surviving. What type of selection for body size appears to be occurring in these marine iguanas? Is it stabilizing, directional, or disruptive? It is stabilizing because the highest numbers are in the center of the body length. The smaller individuals and the bigger individuals have lower survival percents. Currently, the only predators of Galapagos marine iguanas are Galapagos hawks. If predators are more likely to catch and eat smaller iguanas, what kind of selection would occur and how would the iguanas change? It would be directional selection, and the iguanas would be getting larger because the smaller ones are dying off and not able to contribute to the gene pool. What is fitness in an evolutionary sense? B, being the most able to reproduce. The speciation of ground squirrels on opposite sides of the Grand Canyon is an example of allopatric speciation. Allo being different, patric being location. The speciation of finches that occurred in a small population of the Galapagos Islands is an example of allopatric speciation. They're still geographically separated. If a new population is created by the founder you would expect the genetic diversity in the new population to be blank than the original. Lower, because you have less genes represented. Two species of flies live in the same habitat but have differently shaped genitalia and thus do not mate. This is an example of mechanical prezygotic isolation. Two types of songbirds both inhabit southern Oregon, but one is there in the winter and one is there in the summer. This is an example of temporal prezygotic isolation. A lion and a tiger produce an offspring called a liger. Male ligers are always sterile. This is an example of hybrid infertility postzygotic isolation. The similarities in the bone structure shown below is an example of blank, which were selected for by blank evolution. These are homologous structures, so they are homologies, and they are selected for by divergent evolution. The structures are different because they were adapted to different habitats. Their evolutionary relatedness is similar, so they're homologous structures. The similarities in body structure shown to the right are an example of blanks, which are selected for by blank evolution. These are analogous structures, and this is convergent evolution. They're analogous because a mammal and a fish are not closely related, but the situation in which they evolved, the habitat, made them have similar features, so that's convergent evolution. In evolutionary terms, what is an adaptation? An adaptation is a trait that improves the fitness of its bearer compared to individuals without that trait. It is B. Oh. Which of the following is true about mutations? C, mutations are random and appear without regard for environmental pressures. This is one of my favorite mutations. This is called fascination, when it kind of expands in a linear pattern. Male Galapagos tortoises compete for access to food and mates by stretching out their necks. The males with the longest necks is considered the winner, and he has a better chance of reproducing. Over time, the allele frequency for longer necks will blink within the tortoise population. Increase. It is being selected for, it is a benefit. In Oregon, the eastern part of the state is inhabited by organisms that are adapted to dry conditions. Organisms in the western part of the state are adapted to wet conditions. This is due to which topological feature? The rain shadow effect of the Cascades. Which of the following is the most fundamental reason there are yearly seasons on Earth? Earth's axis is tilted relative to the sun. Which of the following explains why the climate around the equator is wet, but 30 degrees to the north of the south is dry? Convection cells. All right, I have a couple example essay questions for you. I want you to think about, first, what are biomes and what are the two factors that contribute to forming them? Biomes are patterns of habitats that exist on Earth, and the two patterns that, or the two factors that contribute to forming them are moisture level and temperature. So think about that pyramid where we had hot and wet, tropical rainforest, hot and dry, desert, cold, tundra. So I want you to be able to describe each of those different biomes. What is evolution? Include 3 examples of evolution used to support the theory. How does sexual selection occur? And how does it explain the tail of a peacock? What are the trade-offs for such a pretty tail? Evolution is change over time. We see this in microevolution, which is change in allele frequencies and genotype frequencies over time. and in macroevolution, which is speciation, the creation of new species, or extinction, the loss of species over time. Examples of evidence used to support the theory are fossils. We can see extinct organisms that no longer exist. We can see transition in the fossil record. Biogeography, we can see that different organisms historically lived in areas where the continents were attached together, like in Pangaea or Gondwana. Those have since broken up. So plate tectonics and geology also support the idea of evolution. We can see evolution in homologies and analogies, with divergent and convergent evolution explaining the body forms of organisms. We can see evolution with direct observation. We can watch speciation happen in things like microbes, but also Galapagos finches over time. We can see evidence for evolution in our genetic similarity to the other organisms on Earth, implying that we all came from a common ancestor. So please feel free to go through the first lecture. That really hits home the evidence of evolution. And then for sexual selection means that some traits are chosen either by intra-specific competition or inter-specific competition, where a trait gives a benefit to an individual to reproduce. In the example of the peacock, that is intersexual selection. The male peacock has these feathers, and the female peacock finds the male with the most feathers and the most eyes on the feathers to be most desirable. These parts are the eyes here. So if you glue extra eyes onto a peacock's tail, he will have more reproductive success. If you cut them off of a tail, he will have less reproductive success. So this trait is an adaptation. It leads to an evolutionary fitness benefit because there's more offspring produced, but there's also trade-offs. A tail like this means that a peacock is not good at flying and not good at escaping predators. And so it's a balance between looking appropriate to get to mate and having the dangers of such a long, heavy tail. What is genetic drift and how is it different and similar to gene flow? What are the different forms of reproductive isolation based on location and mating ability? So genetic drift is the random chance that some of your population will die off. For example, the bottleneck effect. Another example would be founder's effect. So part of your population moves to a new location, it is no longer representative of the original gene pool. It is not caused by a benefit or an adaptation, it is just random. Gene flow is immigration and emigration. So it's genes being added to or leaving your population. What are different forms of reproductive isolation? We have prezygotic and postzygotic. And based on location and mating ability, that would be like this bird here. If it does not sing the correct song, it's not going to get recognized by its mates. That would be behavioral isolation. It could also be timing. Maybe this bird is here in the spring, but its mates come in the summer. That would be temporal isolation. Maybe this bird's genitalia wouldn't fit. Most birds don't have penises, so maybe its cloaca wouldn't fit. And that would be mechanical isolation. All of those are before you create the zygotes. Cool. That is the end of our practicing for the midterm exam. I hope it was interesting. Let me know if you have any questions and we will talk soon. Bye.